Hello, and welcome back to Sacred Wellness Sessions, a space where we explore healing, transformation, and soulful connection. In today's episode, this is especially close to my heart because I'm joined by my husband, and we're going to open up about our 11-year journey through growth, love, and the conscious relationship that we cultivate together. Our dynamic has been anything but typical. We've learned to honor our energy types, which is generator and projector, Aries and Gemini, and support each other's expansion. We've learned how to navigate messy, beautiful paths and evolve as individuals and partners. Whether you're in a relationship or calling in your conscious partner, healing from past patterns, or whatever it is, this episode is filled with raw truths, hard-earned wisdom, and practical takeaways to support your journey. So let's dive right into this sacred conversation and find out what it really means to evolve together. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for being my guest today. I'm excited to have you here.
I'm very excited to be here. Hopefully I don't mess it up.
We'll see. We'll see how it works. Okay, so let's talk about looking back at these 11 years that we've had together. How would you describe the version of a relationship now versus back then? And what do you think the turning point was that shifted us towards a more conscious connection?
In the beginning, I think we had both just went through some extreme divorces, tough challenges with children being involved. So I don't think in the beginning either one of us was looking for a real serious relationship. But over time, obviously, it matured into a much more serious relationship. And I think the turning point was probably your son Anthony's death, which brought us much closer together. I mourned for you mostly while you were mourning for your son's death. And I was learning more about your life and the lifestyle that you had grown in your spiritual realm.
It was definitely a hard journey at that point. I think up until that point, you hadn't ever even probably seen me cry. I mean, maybe a few times.
Not to that extreme.
With Sophia, yeah, when she was sick. But, you know, a devastating loss, even on a couple that have a child together, people can separate because they grieve so differently and they don't understand what the other is going through, even though they're mourning the same loss. And so for us, you know, it was really a turning point of looking at our relationship and becoming more conscious of what the other person needs and what do I need to do within myself to be able to shift and change what I am. Because as a growth relationship, we're always growing and evolving. And then when we enter a relationship with our spouse or our partner, that relationship is going to grow and evolve when you're in a conscious relationship. So shifting through that really sort of devastating loss, I think, was a pivotal point for us in the rapid growth that we were going to have.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, it was a hard journey, but we got through it. We're still working through it today. It's not, grief isn't one and done and you feel better. And 6 years later, I'm still navigating the journey and we're learning what that looks like for us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about human design. And so that's what I'm really into right now. Human design, I'm a generator. He's a projector. So I generate energy out and he sort of guides that energy. So it's actually a perfect fit. But within that, we function differently in our terms of our energy, right? Our decision making. And then being an Aries and a Gemini, we are also very different in those energies that we carry forward within us. Mm-hmm. So you want to talk a little bit about how we've learned to sort of honor what those differences are without being so much as trying to change somebody? Because I think often in relationships, people try to change one another.
Well, the funny story about Gemini and an Aries couple, especially in our situation, I'm an air sign, she's a fire sign. She says that I stoke her fire, and it doesn't take very much, is what I tell her. I said, and she's ready to go. She's ready to blow. But as a generator, I guess what I'm understanding is she generates the good energy and so forth. and I project it around us and other people to build upon.
You guide it. And so that could
Guide it,
really
yes.
be put true for Gemini and Aries too, because as the fire, right, I have this passion, I have this fire within me. I jump right into whatever I'm doing. I'm very type A. So that fire begins to stoke within me, but they don't really have any way to sort of guide that fire.
Right.
And so that's where he comes in, and he's sort of the guide for that energy that I'm generating. Often with human design, there's pieces of us that aren't fully connected, and we need somebody in order to make those pieces work for us. That's what we're searching out. But also with human design, we're learning how to accept who we are for what we are. Part of me as a generator, I always am very curious. I want to do things and I want to learn things, and everything and anything I want to jump right in and do. And I always had a hard time with that because I would be ridiculed for doing things and quitting it. But if I tried something and I didn't like it, that's how I learned, right? I learned my natural way to learn was to try it. And if I don't like it, I'm done with it and I move on. But as a child, I was sort of ridiculed for that. So human design is about really accepting those pieces of yourself without having that ridicule or shame behind them. So honoring within you too, as well, you know, the pieces of you, because he does things very differently than I want to talk a little bit about some moments in our relationship that really challenged us because we are so different and we came from different families. We both grew up in very unconscious families, and we're both, you know, cultivating this conscious relationship. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, we both come from, like you said, very different upbringings. Terry Ann's family is a very loving Italian family, hugs, kisses, do a lot of things together. And early in my life, I felt like my family did a lot of things together, but we weren't as huggy lovey as her family is. So anyway, in relationships, you know, we're learning communication is key to everything.
And yeah, I remember the time that we were living in Jack's house. We were only together a year, and we both got a stomach flu, and it was going through the whole house, and I was sick. And I wanted attention. I wanted to be hugged and kissed. And he was like, I can't kiss you. You're sick. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm sick. You need to take care. I need a hug and a kiss and attention. Yeah. And, you know, I was sort of devastated that he wasn't like that. So I think for me at that moment, it showed me that was a big challenge for us, I think, because I came from that. That's what I expected. And you didn't do it. So I always felt that I wasn't getting what I needed.
I've had to learn to change, yes, and become more aware of your feelings and what you need.
I think in any relationship, right? I mean, you're always navigating, especially early on, what that journey is. Because what attracts you to somebody is usually the opposite. And then in a growth relationship, we are looking to push one another out of our comfort zones. You know, what is it within him that I need within me? Or what is it within me that he needs within him? And then looking for ourselves, what is that? So being as the person that I am and how I grew up, there were certain things that I expected. I could have took that and looked at it as, you know, a real power struggle, I guess, or wanting to change you. But rather than that, we were able to express through communication and sharing is how we learned really to navigate and manage. How do I get my feelings out without yelling and screaming how you hurt me? And how are you getting your feelings out to be able to be heard?
Through communication in general instead of holding it in, yeah.
Right, because you weren't really given the opportunity to be able to communicate.
Right.
So that navigation of how does that all look and how does that work for you has really been a cycle for us to sort of navigate and push through.
Right. You're learning to hold back a little bit, whereas I'm learning to express more.
Yeah, that's a perfect way of putting it.
Yeah. Balance.
Let's see. Balance. Yeah. Balance is something I really talk about, and I strive on this podcast because it is about sacred wellness and the balance of mind, body, and soul, and how keeping that balanced in everything. I want to talk a little bit about the divine masculine and the divine feminine, because I do a lot of that in my work. Balancing what that is, embodying that. And I want to know from you, what really surprised you most in your own expression of seeing how you did things, but then how you needed to sort of shift things.
I think in the beginning, I didn't realize that I was as passive as I am, that I thought I was more outgoing and more like a decision maker, a leader. But I learned quickly that I was not. And we're slowly trying to shift to where I'm more the masculine leader and you're more the feminine supporter, and so forth.
But I think that comes through communication as well, because
yeah.
even just recently we had an instance with Anthony's birthday, and I was able to verbalize that, hey, I need this, this, and this, and I need my space. And, he had to be the one to sort of step up and tell everybody that, this is what mom needs.
I told, I informed the children that live in the same town with us or with us to try to hold back from communicating with mom today, just to keep their anger and issues at balance so mom can get through the day, not to overwhelm her.
Yeah, and so that's something we're still navigating, is this grief journey. It's just 6 years. Anthony would have been 33, and it hits differently. I thought there were some years we spread his ashes, and some years we celebrated him, and there were some years that I stayed in bed all day and cried. Mm-hmm. This year I read some of his poetry, and it brought a smile to my heart, but it also broke my heart in the same time. Mm-hmm. So I think 6 years later, that's still I think it's important for people to know that if you're on a grief journey, it's still a grief journey, and it's not gonna, it's for you to decide what you really need through that process, and being able to communicate what that is with your partner.
Yeah, everybody processes grief differently.
Mm-hmm. So what surprised you really then, that you were more passive? Because you were a salesman, right? You had to go out there and really hustle.
Right, yeah. And even as I look back on it as a salesman, I was probably still somewhat passive. I remember my tagline, or whatever you want to call it, when I would try to get a new account was, basically I would say to them, I don't want to waste your time or waste anybody's time here. Would you be willing to share your cost with me through your current provider? And if I can't beat it by 5 or 10%, then I'll tell you, you're getting a great deal. I can't do anything.
So I think for you and me, right, it was about learning to set boundaries. We both had to learn really well about setting boundaries. Mm-hmm. We had to learn how to voice our opinion, me without yelling and you without shutting down.
Right. For me, it was more about communication, and everything in the relationship is communication based. You need to have that strong communication without overexerting.
Yeah, and I think in order to have that communication, though, you need safety, and you have to be able to be vulnerable with your partner. You have to be in a safe place to share with one another openly your fears, your desires, your wins, your losses, everything. And I think, you've seen me at my worst.
Yeah, it's not a competition. You're there to support each other.
You're definitely a team. For us, it's when I look back at it, it's hard to believe, first of all, that it's been 11 years. We've gone through so much. And I think that shows in us when we're together. Like, people will say to us, oh, you guys are so cute. You're such a great relationship. You look alike, and it works really well. And I remember when we met Alita, she did her first psychic reading in Sedona, and Tim was not spiritually awake.
I didn't know what I was doing.
And I was. And I felt this connection to him that I had not felt before with a man. And when I met him, and when she told us about a past life we had together, I was like, you see, I know I knew you. And I know this was something, because I felt it within every aspect of me. But that doesn't mean that our relationship's perfect, because as a growth relationship, we're often challenging one another to sort of step out of that comfort zone.
Was that life that Anita told us about, was that when you were a nun and I supposedly killed you or shot you? Was that the right story?
No, that came later.
That was later.
That's a whole different show. That one was
Which one was
we
the
were
latest
not
story?
together, but we were like in the old West,
Okay.
in the Midwest, and we were traveling together, and I was married to an abusive husband,
Oh,
sort of overshadowing
yeah.
our life today. And you loved me, but we couldn't be together because of this abusive husband that I had. So at that time, we sort of vowed to not be together,
Mm-hmm.
even though we loved each other. And we went our separate ways, but we vowed in another life to come together as husband and wife.
Gotcha.
So that was very pivotal for me because I was going through massive shifts and changing when we moved to Sedona. We had just bought our business. We were growing and expanding in ways I can't even describe into physical words.
Right.
It was a beautiful time. What advice would you give to couples? We're on question 5. What advice would you give to couples who are struggling to connect on a deeper emotional level or spiritual level, especially if you have a man who's not really emotional or emotionally available? What kind of advice would you give that guy?
Well, you definitely need to become more emotionally available, share your feelings. It's not going to make you look less manly to a woman. I've learned that. You got to build a level of trust. And the most important thing is communication and looking for the signs when your spouse is having an issue, and learn how to deal with those with, like for instance, Terry Ann, if she's upset, she may tell you she doesn't want a hug, but that's usually what she wants.
Or what about the time, oh my gosh, you remember when I told you don't talk to me? I was mad. And then he didn't talk to me. Can you believe it? He actually did that.
I thought that's what she wanted. That's the way she expressed it. But yes, I've learned if she tells me she's going to the bedroom to be alone, that's code for come talk to me in the bedroom.
And I called my son, my oldest son, and I was yelling like, I told him not to talk to me, and then he didn't talk to me. Can you believe he did that to me? And he's like, Ma, that's what you asked him to do. What do you women do to us? You drive us crazy. Like, why did you tell him that if that's not what you wanted? And I'm like, because I wanted him to come and comfort me then.
Yeah, we're totally two different. Even though we're both human, we're totally two different species. Men take everything literally, and women like to give subtle hints to what they want without having to ask you directly.
Or they may say, don't talk to me, and they really mean don't talk to me.
Yeah, that's the tough part, is figuring out which one they mean.
It really is a dance. And I think, nobody can speak for your relationship. Only you can look at your relationship and see what it is that each of you bring to the table. Because I truly believe on this path, we're always growing and evolving. Mm-hmm. And so as I grow and evolve, Tim has to grow and evolve. Otherwise, what happens is a natural progression of separation.
And yes, unfortunately, one of you is always going to grow a little bit slower, which in this case is me. But she's done a very good job of being patient with me. And that's what's kept our relationship going, is the fact that we've learned to adjust to each other's faults.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I like that. What do you think helped you really reflect or shift your own patterns? Because like I said, it's a growth journey, but we're also growing internally. So we're looking at what's going on within me. What do I need to change? And often those are things that you need to change, but you're really not sure how to change them. So for example, if I had to put it into physical words, I'm more verbal.
Right.
I'm more outspoken.
Yes.
And he's more quiet and reserved.
The quieter and more reserved I am, probably the madder I am.
So how do you navigate and take a little bit of me and put that into you? And how do I learn to sort of take a little bit of him and put that into me to create that balance? Because you have either one that's totally masculine or one that's totally feminine. So it's about that dance of finding the masculine and feminine. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm trying to learn more about expressing my feelings, communicating, because you can't bottle it up, because that makes things worse in the long run. You have to just learn to express your feelings and not worry about hurting someone's feelings. There's always ways to word it the right way so that you don't hurt someone's feelings if you're mad about something. You have to learn to work together as a team. Accept who you are.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to
and who
put
your
it.
spouse is.
Well, which is a learning process.
Yes, takes time. And I don't think in a good relationship anyway, I don't think you ever stop learning.
Well, a conscious relationship. And more often than not, many of us come from unconscious families.
Right.
So we weren't really taught how to offer that support. I give you a perfect example. When I raised my older boys, you were told, suck it up, you'll get over it. Life's hard, then you die. That's what I was taught. So that's what I taught my older sons.
Right.
And not until much later in life did they say to me when I had my daughter and now my stepdaughter, well, you're so different. And it's because I know differently now. I know how to offer that support. Whereas before I didn't know how to offer that support. So it's about learning. Just because you were raised one way doesn't mean that you have to be that way.
Right. Life is a learning lesson all the time.
And I think when you're conscious, you're more conscious, right? You go back to your unconscious families and you really see clearly the differences in you and them and how you're treated.
Yes. Your upbringing, you look back at the way your parents dealt with things and then you learn from their mistakes. But you're never going to be perfect.
No, and it's not to reflect and say that, that was bad or they did it wrong because they were just learning too. But those things need to be healed and released so that you can be in a conscious relationship with yourself and with others. Talk a little bit about how we navigate personal growth and often how are we learning, because me and you, or me being more the masculine, you being more the feminine. I'm learning to be more the feminine. You're learning to be more masculine. How do you think that works? And what kind of practices do we do that help us stay on that journey?
Yeah, I'm trying to initiate more of being the leader. And she's trying to initiate more of being the supporter. But we take weekly salt baths together to try to bring ourselves closer together. We try to limit our TV, phone time. Like before going to bed, we used to both be on our phones till we were ready to go to sleep. Now we try to keep an hour just to ourselves to, read some books and meditate. I've learned, seems like the meditation, I have very vivid dreams after we meditate that night. And those are the simple things to keep yourselves closer and grow together.
And I think our daughters think it's gross that we take a bath together. But I think later on in life, they're going to really notice like, hey, my parents did this and they made sure that they had time for one another to help them be better people and to be better parents.
Make sure you have a big bathtub too.
Luckily we do.
Yeah, but in the past we didn't. That was tough. I'm a big fella.
So let's talk a little bit about what a conscious relationship means to you now, and what kind of vision do you hold for us as where we're headed as a couple in the future? I think this is a great question.
Right.
If I say so myself.
Well, you just have to be mindful and aware of the differences because no two people are alike. You have to just work on your connection. Make sure you understand what each person needs to get through the bad parts of their day. And when there's a conflict, you just have to learn the, things that work. Like I said, for instance, with Terry, offer a hug, even if she says no. Sometimes I have to force it.
That is a good point.
And for me, I think it's just positive affirmation is what Terry gives me.
Yeah, know your partner's love language. It may seem cliche right now, but it really is true. We are also different. We're so unique and we have different needs than everybody else in our family. If you even look at the needs of your children and how they have different love languages, one's not going to be like the other. You have to give them different things. I learned this when my boys were little because they were so different. And the other two, you could raise a hand to them and they would run and hide. My youngest son, you could beat him and it still wouldn't change anything. I would have to learn to cry. And when I started to get upset, when I yelled at him and I told him, what he did, that would hurt him. And so that would make him change, right? His thinking about everything and what he did. But up until that, I could lock him in his room, take away all his toys. Nothing worked. And he's probably still like that today. I want to thank you so much for joining us in this heartfelt episode. I hope our story reminds you that conscious relationships aren't about perfection. Often we look to other people and we say, hey, they look perfect. They look like a perfect couple. Everything's easy for them. And that's so not true.
Everybody else struggles.
A conscious relationship is really about putting in the work, doing the deep, intensive work on yourself, and creating and cultivating that within you so that you and your partner can create something together. So I'd love to hear what stood out for you the most. Tag me on Instagram or leave me a comment. If you're ready to deepen your own connection, or whether with your partner or yourself, reach out for a session. I can help you with that. And if you're interested in learning more about our journey and having Tim back on the show, I'd love to hear that too. We have so many stories to tell. We lived on the road for a year in our RV while I homeschooled my daughter. And we traveled across the U.S. And so our whole time
ask her about the Anthony, Texas trip.
Yes, it was guided. And so we'll share that in my next show when we have Tim come back and talk about that. But I want to thank you for listening and joining us today. Until next time, keep choosing growth, love, and keep choosing you. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.